You're watching Unveiled Truths. Real stories, dark secrets, hidden justice. Bristol, 1967. A quiet street, an ordinary morning. The kind of day no one remembers, except for what was found behind one locked door. Camera pans across old black and white photos of a smiling young woman. 75-year-old Louisa Dunne lived alone in a modest brick house. The sort of woman who kept her curtains perfectly straight and waved to the milkman every morning. That night, though, no one saw her wave. When neighbors noticed her letterbox overflowing, they called the police. What they found would haunt the city for generations. One of her neighbors, uneasy, climbed the narrow stairs of her small home in Cotham Hill. He calls her name, no answer. The door unlocks with a hesitant turn. Inside, time seems frozen. A half-eaten slice of toast. A bottle of cheap perfume. And then, silence that feels alive. Louisa Dunne hadn't vanished. She was right there, lying still in her bedroom. Her life brutally stolen. The air unnatural, heavy with what had happened. The police arrive. The scene tells its own story. Signs of a struggle, torn fabric, the unmistakable marks, if violence. The city holds its breath. The investigation began quickly, and then stalled just as fast. Evidence was scarce, witnesses uncertain. In 1967, the word forensics meant little. DNA was still a scientist's dream. Detectives worked by instinct, fingerprint dust, and witness memory, all of which led nowhere. Headlines read, 75-year-old woman murdered in her home. But days turned into months, then years. Her family died, waiting for answers. Her case file was boxed, labeled, and pushed into the shadows of police archives. For decades, Louisa's case file gathered dust in an archive box, labeled simply, Unsolved, 1967. And yet, the evidence, slides, clothing, fragments of skin cells, hair strands, slept quietly, waiting for science to catch up. For nearly 6 decades, Louisa's name lived only in whispers, her story almost forgotten. The house changed owners. But deep inside the archives, one detective refused to let it go. When cold case DNA technology arrived in the 2000s, a small fragment from Louisa's clothing was tested, and incredibly, it yielded a male DNA profile. Still, no match appeared. Then, in 2023, nearly 56 years later, a curious thing happened. The UK's National DNA Database, routinely updated from criminal samples, pinged a match. It belonged to a man named Ryland Headley, a retired engineer living quietly in Somerset. At the time of the crime, he had been a 34-year-old local worker. DNA technology in 1967? Non-existent. But in 2025, that single hair strand changed everything. Officers knocked on his door. The frail old man trembled, insisting he didn't remember her. But science remembered. Every cell, every strand of DNA remembered everything. They collected fresh DNA. When the lab confirmed the match, officers described the room falling silent, as if 58 years of ghosts had suddenly started breathing again. The same man who lived quietly for decades, through marriages, wars, and elections, had once walked into an old woman's home, taken her life, and vanished into the fog of history, until science brought him back. In 2025, Bristol Crown Court. The courtroom was silent as Headley shuffled in, eyes hollow, behind thick glasses. Prosecutors described what happened that night in 1967. Headley broke into Louisa's flat, attacked her, raped her, and when she screamed, he silenced her. The jurors listened, pale and motionless. Prosecutors read the evidence in a voice as steady as it was damning. DNA from Louisa's nightdress matched. Partial fingerprints on the doorframe matched. A hair from her hand matched. Headley sat expressionless, his voice barely audible. When the verdict was read, guilty of rape and murder, the gallery wept. He became the oldest person in Britain ever convicted of such crimes. No family members remained to cry for Louisa. But outside, reporters called it what it was. Justice, 58 years late, but not denied. Louisa Dunne was buried in an unmarked grave in Bristol decades ago. In 2025, local residents raised funds for a new headstone, not because they knew her, but because they remembered her story. Her killer found, her peace restored. And somewhere in the silence of a cold case archive, a single file was finally stamped. White heavy checkmark closed. Louisa Dunne's story is more than tragedy. It's proof that truth can wait a lifetime, but it never dies. An elderly woman, silenced in her own room, now speaks through history and science. 58 years later, her story reminds us, the past never stays buried. You're watching Unveiled Truths, real crime stories, dark secrets, hidden justice. If you believe every secret eventually comes to light, subscribe, like, and share this video to keep Louisa's story alive.